Bum, 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 bum. The Peter Dislike Show. Bum, 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 bum. So here in 2025, there's a lot of discussion on healthy workplaces and working conditions, but I think they all center around a couple of things. And I think workplace conditions is a much bigger subject than most people would like to admit. And I can think of a few things. See, a lot of people forget that your workplace conditions don't just affect you when you're at work. A lot of times, the effects spill out to your lifestyle, and they make it hard for you to follow a healthy lifestyle. They can affect your relationships, and they spill out. And I'm going to bring up a couple of examples where that happens. First, let's talk about some unhealthy workplaces that I've been at. You see, I've never had a job where I dislike the core elements of the job, whatever I'm doing, right? But it's all of the ancillary things that have to go around the job that I have a tendency to dislike, right? So you ever hear somebody who says that they are, I don't know, fill in whatever career you like, right? There's a tendency to forget that you don't magically go from Joe Schmo to whatever at the snap of a finger. There's a lot of ancillary stuff that has to do with office politics. You got to commute there, and I'm glad there's a lot of discussions about remote work and returning to the office. But that only scratches the surface, in my opinion. I struggle with eating disorders, and I really despise how my work pigeonholes where I could eat, right? In an ideal world, people should be free to eat, even if they're at work, even if they're teaching a class, even if they're working some kind of customer service. Here, it's not uncommon to, here in Taiwan, actually, that's closer to the reality. It's not unusual to go to a 7-Eleven and see the cashier eating behind the desk. You would never see that over in the United States, but I like it. And here's why. One of the biggest tools one can use when grappling with binge eating is to constantly remind yourself, hey, I'm having this craving. Let's wait 5-10 minutes, give myself a diversion. I'll come back to it in 5-10 minutes. Well, unfortunately, if 5-10 minutes later you're going to be in an environment where you can't eat, you lose that tool. And that's what happened to me at a lot of jobs. Now, at the community college where I teach, students technically aren't allowed to eat in the classroom, but I very seldom enforce it unless they're making a fool of themselves doing it. I very seldom enforce it because I know how it is to be pigeonholed in when and where I can eat. So, in an ideal world, nobody should be prevented from eating anywhere and of anything unless there's some sort of hazard to themselves or others. And so, for example, the best example is if you work in something where eating would be dangerous, right? Dangerous chemicals, explosives, or you really need to pay attention to what you're doing, like if you're driving, right? Those are the best examples I can think of where there's good reason. Other than that, I don't see a good reason to ban anybody from eating. Now, the caveat is you got to do it in an orderly way, right? If you're making a mess everywhere, if you're spreading foods that could set off allergies everywhere, yeah, I would ban that part of the equation, but not the eating part of it, right? And I think it is possible to eat in an orderly way. I often got in trouble with this. I would tell the students about how to not make a mess of yourself when you eat. I was working at a tutoring center, and my boss would overhear this, and he would get really upset, and he thought that I was the eating is my boss would say that that I was prying into people's personal lives by saying how they could eat. Yeah, as if telling people not to eat is not prying even more, right? That's the other problem I have. A lot of people are so risk averse. It's a lot easier to enforce no eating, right? And it's a lot harder to enforce eat, but be responsible with how you do it, right? Even though it's the right thing to do. We have a system where right or wrong has been replaced with what's convenient to do, right? And that's the other problem that I wanted to talk about. I had gone to apply for, well, this is a habit I do now. Every time I go to a job interview, I make sure to check out the bathrooms because some workplaces put a ton of fragrances in their bathroom. I can't use. I get a headache, and I was working at a tutoring center, and I loved all the students. I loved all the subject. Actually, at that particular center, I actually did get along with my boss. Unfortunately, I got along with my boss too well, and I was worried that if I told him about the fragrances, it might rock the boat. And so every day when I went there, I was only there for a 2, 3, 4 hour shift often. I was teaching at a technical college as well. Every time I went there, I often hesitated about how much fluid I would drink because I didn't want to end up in the bathroom. And the few times that I had to go to the bathroom, I would go next door. There was a sandwich shop, and eventually the sandwich shop got really tired of me. And when I explained the MCS and all that, they thought I was joking. And it just here's the other problem with a lot of more awareness about all of the little kinks that your colleagues might run into, right? Whether it be MCS, autism, food allergies, right? A lot of these hidden differences in bodies. There's not a whole lot of awareness. Um, and so I now make it a regular habit to go to the bathroom as my first assignment every time I go to a job interview. And so I've never run into that again. I feel like you know, it's kind of like how after the shoe bombing incident, we kept checking people's shoes at the airport. I feel like I'm engaging in that, right? I'm fighting the last difficulty. I always feel like I'm doing that every time I check out a new job, right? What was the last difficulty I ran into at the last job? I'm being very reactionary to all of this, but I still think that awareness of well, first of all, fragrances are a big one, right? I don't every time I think of workplace uh, uh, conditions, the first thing that jumps to mind is fragrances because I run into that a lot, and it always creates a conflict when you bring it up, right? Very seldom do you bring it up and okay, I'll take it away. Very seldom, right? Um, Here in Taiwan, it's a lot easier, I would say. I've never run into a public place unless it was a business revolving around fragrances. I've never run into a public place where I was overpowered by fragrances right here in Taiwan. Okay, and also, this is something I'm going to run into when I get home. Here in Taiwan, I feel it's a lot easier to speak without being worried who you might offend, right? So just before I left for my vacation to Taiwan, one day I was just chit chatting with one of my colleagues, and I didn't know how to break the ice with her, and so I told her, I'm going to Taiwan in 2 weeks, and little piece of trivia: did you know that in Taiwan, the emergency phone number isn't 911; it's 119? And I asked her, which number do you think looks better? And we're both mathematicians. I was just asking her, do you like 911 or 119 better? We both think about numbers all the time. She got really offended by that remark. HR came to talk to me and said that, she had some situation in her life, and the concept of talking about the concept of calling 911 made her uncomfortable, something like that. And I made a mental note to not use that example anymore. But ever since then, I don't know what I could talk to her about. We would be talking about scheduling, about a student. Hey, learn from this experience from that student, and I would think about, oh yeah, what about? I would think about some questions I might ask her, but you know what? I would be like, I don't know if that's going to offend her. I really think we should be able to share ideas without so much fear, right? Actually, part of the reason I keep asking you guys to pray that I make $10 million on my art projects is that if I had $10 million in my pocket, I would do all of these things more fearlessly, right? I would eat in front of the students if I needed to. I would speak my mind when I mean, granted, use common sense, but speak my mind. I would unplug the air fresheners when I need to, fearlessly, right? I would, not to mention, I would live a whole lot closer to campus. I would have to have less of I wouldn't have to worry about commutes. And a lot of people say if they won $10 million, they would quit their job. No, I would go to my job in style, right? I swear, I'm recording this as a record. I swear that's how it will play out. So why don't you pray that I make $10 million on my Legos? This is the Peter Dislike Show. Bum 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 bum.